cruelty rarely announces itself as cruelty. More often, it arrives dressed as amusement. A raised eyebrow, a whisper behind a jeweled fan, a laugh shared by people wealthy enough to believe humiliation is harmless when it happens to someone beneath them. So when the Duke of Blackthorn stopped in the middle of Lady Harcourt's winter ball and turned toward the young woman kneeling beside a torn silk gown, nearly 200 guests leaned forward with the same expectation. They thought they understood what was happening. The girl wore no jewels, no gloves, no fashionable gown, only a plain brown dress, a sewing kit tied at her waist, and the unmistakable expression of someone who knew she did not belong among chandeliers worth more than everything she had ever owned. She was the household seamstress. The Duke was one of the most powerful unmarried men in England, and everyone in the ballroom knew he had rejected 11 eligible women in 18 months. Lady Harcourt's eldest daughter had spent the entire evening trying to capture his attention. Her mother had spent a small fortune arranging it. Yet now the Duke was walking past heiresses, widows, daughters of earls and granddaughters of marquises. The laughter began before he even reached her. Lady Beatrice Harcourt smiled behind her fan. Her younger sister whispered something to a friend. Several gentlemen turned openly to watch. The seamstress heard them. Poor people become very skilled at hearing laughter that rich people imagine is quiet. The Duke stopped. The girl slowly raised her eyes. He looked down at her. She looked back. Then he did something no one in that glittering room expected. He bowed. Not the slight acknowledgement a nobleman might offer a servant. A full bow. "Miss Hale," he said. His voice carried easily across the silence. "You once told me that a man who fears appearing foolish has already surrendered his freedom." A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "So, I suppose we should discover whether you were right." Her daughter looked ready to shatter her champagne glass. And the Duke of Blackthorn, who had not danced publicly since returning from war, looked directly at the poorest woman in the room. "Will you dance with me?" Some prayed she would accept, because humiliation was always more entertaining when the victim participated willingly. The seamstress stared at his outstretched hand. There's certainty that a woman like her could never stand beside a man like him without becoming ridiculous. And slowly, very slowly, Clara Hale rose to her feet. Back to the spring morning when neither of them knew the other's name. Clara Hale had learned at 23 that poverty did not arrive like thunder. Friends who stopped visiting because misfortune made comfortable people uncomfortable. Her father, Samuel Hale, had owned a modest printing shop in York. Samuel believed in two things with religious certainty. The first was that books should be read. The second was that daughters possessed brains. Therefore, Clara had grown up reading everything that passed through his printing press. By 16, she could spot a printer's error from across a room. By 18, she could calculate columns of figures faster than most clerks. By 20, she could speak French fluently enough to embarrass visiting merchants who assumed she could not understand them. Her father also taught her something less obvious. "Every hand has a rhythm," he would tell her. "People can copy the shape, Clara. They struggle to copy the habit." None of that seemed useful when Samuel died. He caught pneumonia during a winter flood after spending 2 nights helping rescue neighbors trapped near the river. The printing shop was sold. The last page contained only one sentence. "A person's worth does not shrink because someone else refuses to see it." It was the most valuable thing she owned. 3 months after her father's death, she accepted a position as seamstress at Harcourt Hall. It was not the future Samuel Hale had imagined for his daughter. Lady Agnes Harcourt employed nearly 40 servants. Clara occupied an uncertain place among them. She repaired gowns, altered dresses, replaced buttons, mended curtains, restored embroidery, and occasionally spent 12 hours fixing something Lady Harcourt had destroyed in 5 minutes. Her small room was above the laundry. Complaint, Clara had discovered, was most satisfying when one possessed alternatives. Harcourt Hall was full of people who spoke freely around servants because they had trained themselves not to see servants as people. Clara therefore learned more about the Harcourts in 4 months than most relatives knew in 20 years. Lady Agnes Harcourt was desperate to marry her eldest daughter, Beatrice, to a title greater than her own. Sir Edmund Harcourt was desperate to conceal how badly his investments had failed. Beatrice was desperate to become a duchess. And everyone in the house was currently obsessed with the same name. Owner of Blackthorn Abbey and nearly 30,000 acres. "Have you met him?" Clara asked. "No." then Lucifer may sue you for defamation. That should have been the end of the Duke of Blackthorn's importance in her life. The first hint came 3 weeks before Clara ever saw him. Sir Edmund was speaking with a man Clara did not recognize. You are certain Vale never examines the transport accounts himself? His Grace sees totals, the stranger replied. Not invoices. And Northbridge? Quiet. You said that last quarter. And it remains true. Sir Edmund lowered his voice. The marriage would simplify matters. It would simplify everything. Then the stranger said, I should return before I am missed. A tall, gray-haired man emerged from the study. Sir Edmund stepped out moments later carrying a folded document sealed with dark green wax. What are you doing here? Mending your coat, sir. How long? Nearly an hour. You heard nothing? Only this refusing to cooperate. He stared at her for a second too long. Clara told herself it was none of her concern. Northbridge meant nothing to her. The gray-haired man meant nothing to her. And poor women survive by knowing which doors not to open. Then, 3 weeks later, Clara met Adrian Vale in the rain. The road outside Harcourt Village had turned to mud by noon. Clara had been sent to collect imported lace from a merchant whose wagon had arrived late. She carried the parcel beneath her cloak and hurried along the hedgerow as rain struck sideways across the fields. Halfway back to the estate, she heard a horse scream. A black horse struggled in a drainage ditch beside the road. One hind leg was caught beneath broken fencing. A man stood knee-deep in mud trying to free it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, drenched through and furious. Blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow. Stop pulling him, Clara called. Even soaked in mud, he looked like someone accustomed to being obeyed. What? You're frightening him. He is trapped. I can see that. Then unless you possess a miraculous ability to lift half a ton of horse, stop pulling. His expression suggested that no stranger had spoken to him that way in several years. Hold this. Are you insane? Probably. Hold it anyway. For reasons he would later be unable to explain, Adrian Vale took the parcel. She approached the horse from the front, speaking quietly. Easy, she whispered. She removed her cloak and placed it partly over the horse's face. What are you doing? The man asked. My father printed veterinary manuals for a surgeon who could never pay his bills. He paid us in lessons instead. That is an absurd form of currency. It is proving useful today. The fence is pinning him here. If you pull the upper rail when I say, I can turn the lower piece away from his leg. You will be crushed. Not if you do exactly what I tell you. Can you do that? Do what? Exactly what someone tells you. Difficult then. A short, startled sound as though his body had produced it without permission. The animal scrambled upright, trembling but standing. No break. His hand rested briefly against the horse's neck. You care about him. He carried me through France. There was a white scar near his collar. You served. Yes. My father hated war. Your father sounds sensible. He said men who start wars are rarely the men asked to bleed in them. That is a dangerous opinion. He printed dangerous opinions for a living. Where is he now? Dead. What is his name? Caesar. Of course it is. What is wrong with Caesar? Nothing. It simply suggests his owner thinks highly of himself. You have an extraordinary habit of insulting people who could leave you standing in the rain. I was already standing in the rain. Wait. Your name? Clara. Clara what? You have survived knowing only half of it. Barely. Hale. He nodded as though storing it carefully. And you? Adrian. She assumed he was a wealthy gentleman traveling through the district. Then take Caesar slowly, Adrian. He strained the leg. You are giving me orders again. Yes. Do you enjoy it? More than sewing buttons. And then Clara Hale walked back through the rain, carrying Lady Beatrice's French lace. Adrian Vale watched her until she vanished behind the hedgerow. The Duke of Blackthorn arrived at Harcourt Hall 6 days later. Clara discovered his identity by dropping 40 silver buttons across the floor. She was in Beatrice's dressing room. Lady Agnes stood behind her daughter, supervising preparations for dinner. The Duke has arrived, a maid announced breathlessly. Beatrice nearly jumped. Already. He rode instead of taking a carriage. Everyone downstairs. Beatrice, shoulders back. Francis, find the sapphire comb. Clara, finish that hem immediately. A few minutes later, male voices sounded in the entrance hall below. Caesar. He handed the reins to a groom. Then Sir Edmund himself hurried forward. Your Grace. 40 pieces of silver scattered across the floor. Beatrice whirled around. Clara, the man she had ordered around in a drainage ditch. Oh no, she whispered. Beatrice glared. What? Nothing. Because that evening, during dinner, the Duke asked Lady Agnes a very strange question. Do you employ a woman named Clara Hale? A Clara? The seamstress, Beatrice said immediately. Beatrice smiled. Plain little thing. Brown hair. Very quiet. Quiet. Something almost amused passed through Adrian's face. Perhaps we know different women. Clara learned about the conversation before midnight. Clara did the only thing she could. Their second real conversation happened in the library. Clara had been repairing a torn velvet curtain when she heard footsteps. Your Grace. I preferred Adrian. I imagine many people do. Do you? That seems an unnecessarily dangerous question. That reluctant movement, as though smiling, remained unfamiliar. You have been avoiding me. I have been working. You walked into a pantry yesterday when you saw me coming. I needed thread. In the pantry? Very specialized thread. You are angry. No, embarrassed. Yes. Why? Because I told the Duke he had an inflated opinion of himself while he stood in a ditch holding lace. And saved my horse. You omitted the insulting part. I rather enjoyed the insulting part. Then your war injury may have been more serious than I thought. That frightened him more than battlefield cannon ever had. Because he suddenly cared whether she did. Adrian remained at Harcourt Hall far longer than anyone expected. Lady Agnes believed Beatrice was succeeding. Beatrice believed Adrian's frequent disappearances into the West Corridor were evidence of masculine mystery. Only Clara knew that he often disappeared because the West Corridor led to the servants' workrooms. One afternoon, he found her studying estate accounts someone had left on a table. You read ledgers for pleasure? I read errors for pleasure. What error? This column. I see nothing. Exactly. That is not generally how errors work. These payments repeat every quarter. Same amount. Same supplier. But the handwriting changes. You notice handwriting? My father was a printer. And this company, Northbridge Trading. Have you heard of it? Adrian's expression changed so slightly that most people would have missed it. No, he said. Have you truly not? No. Then remembered the voices near Sir Edmund's study. 3 weeks before you arrived, I heard Sir Edmund speaking with a gray-haired man. They mentioned Northbridge. What exactly did they say? That you saw totals, not invoices. What did the man look like? Tall. Gray hair. Perhaps 60. Very straight posture. Mr. Wycliffe. Who? My steward. Wycliffe has served Blackthorn since before I was born. Then perhaps there is an innocent explanation. Do you believe that? I believe evidence should arrive before accusation. That is a remarkably inconvenient principle. The useful ones often are. He stared at the Northbridge entry. Clara added quietly, there is something else. What? These payments are absurd. How absurd? Harcourt Hall has apparently purchased enough lamp oil from Northbridge Trading in 3 years to illuminate London. I will write to Blackthorn. Quietly. You are giving orders again. Yes. Good. That night Adrian wrote to his steward's deputy, not to Wycliffe, requesting copies of several quarterly ledgers under the pretense of reviewing wartime expenses. Northbridge Trading appeared in Blackthorn's accounts too. By midnight, everyone expected Adrian Vale to announce an engagement to Beatrice Harcourt. 2 hours before the ball, Beatrice tore the sleeve of her Paris gown. Lady Agnes reacted as though Parliament had collapsed. Find Clara. Clara spent 90 minutes repairing silk, while Beatrice complained. You understand, Beatrice said, watching herself in the mirror. A woman gets very few opportunities to secure her future. Some fewer than others. Beatrice did not hear the meaning. When I am Duchess of Blackthorn, perhaps I shall take you with me. Take me. You are useful. How generous. Beatrice smiled at herself. Perhaps I will even improve your position. I am overwhelmed. You should be. Then Beatrice's smile faded. My father says Blackthorn is difficult to manage. Does he? He says Adrian is careless with estate matters. Your father discusses the Duke's estate with you? Only generally. Beatrice shrugged. He says once I am mistress there, certain troublesome arrangements can be corrected. What arrangements? Beatrice frowned. How should I know? Contracts. Land. Men's nonsense. Finished. Yes, my lady. Then leave. As she passed Lady Agnes, she noticed dark green sealing wax on the writing table. The same shade Sir Edmund had used months earlier. The same shade on one of the Northbridge invoices Adrian had shown her. At 11:40, Lady Beatrice's gown tore again. A guest had stepped on the train. She entered the ballroom through a side door carrying thread and scissors. Women who looked like flowers and men who looked as though they owned the earth beneath them. Beatrice stood beside the wall, furious. "Fix it here." He did not appear to hear a word. Beatrice followed his gaze. "Clara," a young gentleman nearby said, loudly enough to be heard. "Careful, Blackthorn. Stare at the servants too long, and society may think your standards survived the war even less successfully than your leg." Clara felt heat rise into her face. Beatrice laughed too, because Adrian was the target, and she wanted to show she could tolerate cruelty if it pleased him. Perhaps the Duke means to marry the seamstress. She could repair the family fortune one button at a time. Then she heard Adrian's cane strike the floor. That was the moment from which the entire county would later tell the story differently. "Miss Hale, you once told me that a man who fears appearing foolish has already surrendered his freedom." She remembered saying something similar in the library. "So, I suppose we should discover whether you were right. Will you dance with me?" No, Beatrice's face became white. "Your leg. I have two. One is unreliable. So is its owner." At the women who saw a servant. At Lady Agnes, who saw property behaving incorrectly. A person's worth does not shrink because someone else refuses to see it. Yes. The Duke led the seamstress onto the floor. Samuel Hale had taught her in the printing shop after closing, moving chairs aside while ink dried on the presses. Instead, Clara followed his first step perfectly. His injured leg made one turn difficult. "You compensated. For your left side. No one does that. No one pays attention. You should know," Clara said quietly. "This is a terrible idea. I have had worse. When Spain. That is an unfair comparison. You asked. Pain. Pride. Your pride limps. Tonight, considerably. I am sorry." "For what?" "For allowing them to laugh before I crossed the room. You cannot control everyone." "No, but you can choose what you join." That lesson appears to have cost me 200 witnesses. That was worse for Lady Agnes than any insult could have been. Because mockery could be dismissed. Clara was dismissed before sunrise. Lady Agnes stood in the workroom while Clara packed. "You knew exactly what you were doing. I repaired your daughter's gown. You encouraged him. I barely spoke to him. You made yourself interesting." For the first time, Clara looked up. That intelligence, humor, and dignity were forms of manipulation when possessed by a poor woman. "You mistake existing for scheming," Clara said. "You will leave this estate immediately." "Gladly. You think he will save you?" "No. I think that is what frightens you most." "What?" "I never asked him to." She left Harcourt Hall at 7 in the morning. She reached the village inn before the first carriage found her. Lady Margaret Vale was 62, terrifying, unmarried, and entirely uninterested in diplomacy. "Clara Hale." "Yes." "Get in." "Who are you?" "Margaret Vale. The Duke's aunt." "Oh, you say that as if I have confessed to a disease." "I have had an unusual week." "I know." Lady Margaret looked toward Harcourt Hall. "My nephew is currently having an even more unusual morning." "Where is he?" "Preventing himself from committing murder." "Lady Agnes informed him you left voluntarily." "Of course she did. I informed him that only an idiot would believe her." "Thank you. You may thank me by getting into the carriage before I freeze." "Why?" Lady Margaret studied her. "Because Adrian has offered you employment at Blackthorn." "I do not need charity." "Excellent. Neither do I tolerate it." The older woman handed her a letter. Blackthorn Abbey required someone to reorganize its neglected tenant records, audit household purchasing, and oversee correspondence with local tradesmen. The salary was 4 times what Clara earned as seamstress. "I will not insult you by pretending I am offering this position because I feel nothing for you. I do. But feelings are not wages, and affection is not rescue. You told me once that numbers lie less gracefully than people. I have begun examining mine. I believe I require someone who can see what others have trained themselves not to notice. Whether you ever wish to see me again is your decision. The work is yours if you want it. Did you approve this?" "No, I insisted he double the salary. If one intends to scandalize society, one should at least pay competent staff." For the first time since leaving Harcourt Hall, she climbed into the carriage. Blackthorn Abbey was colder than Clara expected. A vast stone house occupied by ghosts disguised as furniture. Adrian's elder brother had died 5 years earlier. His mother had died the following winter. Clara understood quickly why Adrian spent more time outdoors than inside, and did not attempt to repair him. Discovered 16 families being overcharged by an estate agent. Established a small reading room for workers' children. Found an elderly tenant whose rent had been recorded incorrectly for 12 years. And throughout those first months, Mr. Wycliffe watched. The gray-haired man from Sir Edmund's study. Wycliffe was polite to her. He merely questioned why an estate of Blackthorn size required a former seamstress to inspect matters traditionally handled by gentlemen. Because the gentlemen missed them. After that, Wycliffe smiled whenever Clara entered a room. Northbridge trading appeared everywhere. Then she found the signature. The curve of the V was wrong. The pressure on the final stroke inconsistent. If I am correct, someone has stolen nearly £40,000 from you. That is impossible. No, those invoices were authorized. Yes. By me. No, Clara placed an authentic letter beside the invoices. Someone is copying your signature. Wycliffe, I do not know. You think it. I think evidence is pointing toward him. He served my father for 27 years. I know. He taught me to ride. I know. He carried me home when I broke my arm at 12. That does not make him innocent. No, it only makes this painful. Then, too sharply, you distrust everyone because life has taught you to. Adrian knew instantly he had struck somewhere he had no right to touch. Clara, you asked me to find what others overlooked. I know. I did. I know. If you want obedience instead of truth, hire someone else. Clara, I am sorry. I do not want Wycliffe to be guilty. That is not the same as believing he is innocent. No, Clara placed the papers back on the desk. We verify before we accuse. Northbridge trading belonged secretly to Sir Edmund Harcourt through a chain of false partnerships. For 4 years, Wycliffe had approved inflated contracts at Blackthorn. Wycliffe received a percentage. Among old legal papers, Clara found a draft mortgage against nearly 8,000 acres of Blackthorn land. Adrian's signature was not. If the mortgage were registered under the right circumstances, Blackthorn could be tied up in litigation for years. Clara remembered Beatrice's words. And suddenly the winter ball looked entirely different. The Harcourts had not simply wanted Beatrice to marry a duke. If she became Duchess of Blackthorn, Sir Edmund would gain family access to Adrian's household. Adrian sat in the library staring at the evidence. They never wanted me. They wanted what came with you. That is not better. No, I nearly married her. You considered doing your duty. That is what lonely men call surrender when they want it to sound honorable. Perhaps. You agree? You were lonely. You make that sound like an illness. It can be. And what is the treatment? Not marrying Beatrice Harcourt. The forged mortgage draft proved intent, but not execution. Wycliffe still controlled several locked account boxes. Adrian ordered them brought to the main records room the following morning. Just after midnight, Clara woke to bells. The records room was burning. Stay back. The Northbridge papers. Damn the papers. They are the evidence. Clara. She wrapped a wet cloth around her mouth and entered the outer records room before the fire spread fully across the ceiling. The iron account box lay beneath it. A burning curtain dropped behind her. Together they pulled the box into the corridor. A beam cracked overhead and crashed into the room a second later. Adrian shoved Clara against the stone wall. You absolute lunatic. The box is out. I do not care about the box. You will tomorrow. I nearly watched you die tonight. Adrian Vale, who had faced cavalry charges, was shaking because Clara had disappeared into smoke. Adrian, no estate is worth you. Before she could answer, a groom ran down the corridor. Your Grace, Mr. Wycliffe is gone. Wycliffe had taken a horse. In his hurry, he had carried the wrong leather case. The case containing the original Northbridge partnership papers remained in the iron box Clara had dragged from the fire. By noon, the magistrate had copies. By evening, riders were searching every road south. Wycliffe was arrested 2 days later at an inn near Oxford after attempting to purchase passage under another name. Only a tired old man carrying £300 in notes and Sir Edmund Harcourt's letters in his coat. And one sentence regarding Beatrice's proposed marriage. Once she is at Blackthorn, the rest becomes family business. Then handed the letter to Clara without speaking. The confrontation with the Harcourts took place in a magistrate's office 3 weeks later. Lady Agnes entered dressed as though attending court. Sir Edmund looked 10 years older. Beatrice came last. For once she wore no expression at all. Sir Edmund refused to look at either. Lady Agnes did enough looking for everyone. This is absurd, she said. My husband has been deceived by an unscrupulous steward. Wycliffe, seated under guard across the room, laughed bitterly. Sir Edmund flinched. The magistrate opened one of the letters. This girl has poisoned everything. Careful. She was a seamstress. She still knows how to sew. I failed to see the relevance. She insinuated herself into your household. I was hired. You set yourself above your station. Beatrice suddenly turned. Mother, stop. Beatrice. I said stop. Did you know? Sir Edmund did not answer. Did you know that if I married him, you meant to use me to hide this? Beatrice went pale. You told me I would save the family. And you would have. Beatrice recoiled as though struck. You knew too? For the first time, Clara saw Beatrice not as the glittering young woman who had laughed at her in a ballroom, but as another daughter used as a tool by parents who measured worth and advantage. Beatrice looked at Clara. I laughed at you. Yes. I thought you wanted what was mine. No, Beatrice gave a broken laugh. There was never anything that was mine. You can decide what is yours next. Lady Agnes stared at her daughter in disbelief. Beatrice stepped away from her mother. That was the last time Clara ever saw the Harcourt family together. Sir Edmund was convicted of fraud. Wycliffe testified in exchange for a reduced sentence. Lady Agnes moved to relatives in Bath. Harcourt Hall was sold. Beatrice did something society found almost more shocking than scandal. Years later, Clara received a short letter. No apology grand enough to become self-indulgent. You were right. Existing is not scheming. I wish I had understood that sooner. Because change, when genuine, deserved to be noticed. Blackthorn recovered most of what had been stolen. Then the person half the county quietly consulted when contracts contained numbers they did not understand. She remained at Blackthorn for 14 months before Adrian proposed. Instead, he waited until Clara possessed money of her own. Clara had convinced him to purchase a small press for Blackthorn School. She stood examining the first page produced from it when Adrian entered. You are smiling, he said. I like the smell. Of ink. Of home. What have you done? Nothing. That is exactly how guilty people answer. I am trying to propose marriage. Oh, you have ruined the opening. You should have prepared better. I fought at Salamanca with less fear. Did anyone interrupt you? Frequently. With cannon. I loved you in the rain before I knew your surname. I loved you in the library when you made fraud sound like poetry. Adrian. I loved you when you danced with me while 200 people laughed. And I loved you when you disagreed with me. That happened often. Constantly. It was exhausting. But I did not ask you then because you had nowhere else to go. I needed to know that if you stayed because you chose me. You have your salary. Yes. Your position. Yes. Your cottage. Yes. Your unreasonable collection of books. They are perfectly reasonable. You have enough money saved to leave Blackthorn tomorrow and never speak to me again. Yes. Good. He finally took a small box from his pocket. Then now I can ask without rescuing you. It was a simple gold ring surrounding a small green stone. The color of fields after rain. Clara Hale, will you marry me? I should warn you that I remain stubborn. I know. My leg aches in winter. I know. I occasionally become unbearable when people disagree with me. Frequently. I am attempting romance. Continue. I do not need someone beneath me. I do not want someone behind me. I want the woman who stood beside me before either of us understood what that would cost. A tear escaped down Clara's cheek. So. Yes. Yes. Yes, Adrian. His shoulder struck the printing press. The fresh page fell to the floor. And somewhere, she imagined, Samuel Hale was laughing too. They married quietly the following spring. Lady Margaret insisted that 50 guests constituted quiet. Caesar was decorated with flowers by several tenant children and looked deeply offended. He was trying not to limp. His hair had begun to curl at the temples. He reached for a stack of correspondence. Clara closed her ledger. No, Adrian froze. No what? You rode too long. I rode exactly long enough. You are favoring the left leg. I am walking. Badly. I am a duke. Your leg appears unimpressed. He sighed. Clara pointed to the chair beside the fire. Sit down, Adrian. For a moment, he looked exactly as he had beside the drainage ditch years earlier. Then he looked at her. At the woman who had once been a seamstress everyone laughed at. At the woman who had seen a trapped horse, a forged signature, a frightened man, a corrupt account, and a lonely house more clearly than anyone else. The corner of his mouth lifted. Yes, Clara. The Duke of Blackthorn sat. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, Clara returned to her accounts while Adrian warmed his injured leg by the fire. Above her desk hung one framed page from Samuel Hale's old notebook. A person's worth does not shrink because someone else refuses to see it. Clara no longer needed the sentence to believe it, but she kept it there anyway, for the servants who entered her office, for the tenant children who came to borrow books, for young women who had been told too often to remain where they were placed, and, occasionally, for dukes, because some lessons take a lifetime to learn, and some people are worth listening to from the very beginning, even when the whole world is laughing.